Good afternoon, good morning, whatever it may be, wherever you're watching. Welcome to Primary Tackles Tips and Tactics, where we tell you what to use and when to use it. Wanted to talk a little bit today about crankbaits. So it's one of those things, there are a lot of different styles, a lot of different techniques. One of the questions we get asked here in the shop is, how do I pick which crankbait to use and when? What kind of bill? What does the different bills do? So we're going to talk about that a little bit, and we're going to kind of go through some different pieces of how to choose what's the right crankbait for you. So they're basically, there's a bunch of different versions, but we're going to talk about standard crankbaits today. Lipped crankbaits, whether they're round lip, coffin lip, square bill, whatever it may be, just to kind of give you some good indications of what to throw, when to throw it, how to throw it, those kind of things. So to start this out, let's just talk about the different styles of bills and why you would use a particular bill at a particular time. So get the close-up going where you can see it real well. So this is a standard square bill crankbait. This is a little 2.5 knockoff. KO is what's referred to in the industry a lot of times. And so a 2.5 is a 2.5 inch roughly crankbait, but that's one of the most common sizes. They come in a lot of different variations. Strike King makes a 4, and just to kind of show you the differences, there's a 4, there's a 2.5, and there's a 1.5, and so that kind of gives you a good indication of what your three different sizes look like. The 4 is a little bigger, a little wider. 2.5 is kind of that middle of the road, and then a 1.5 is the smallest. Now, a 1.5 is by far one of the most common sizes that everybody uses. It's a great size. I've caught 6-7 pound fish on a 1.5. I've caught big fish on a small fish on a 1.5. But you're going to get your most bites. So, but the beauty of a square bill is what it does is it's coming through and it hunts and it goes back and forth and it hunts. But when it hits a stump or whatever, it tends to deflect off of it a lot better than a rounded bill does. So, and you get a lot more reflexible strikes off of these baits. They tend to come through brush a little better than a standard round bill, and so it gives you a better opportunity to put it in the places where fish are. This is another version, like the rare 2.5s. There are different widths, so. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit here in a second as well. But you see, like these two, this is more of a square, squatty body versus a longer, narrower bait. So this is going to have a tighter action, and this one is going to have a more wobbly type action, and it's going to have more action to it. Where that helps you is when you get into that situation where you got muddier water, dirtier water, that you want the fish to be able to find it better. This is one of my little favorites. This is a Zoom, not a Zoom, a WEC, which stands for William Chambers. He passed away a few years back. Very sought after crankbait. These things were selling for $25. It's a balsa style bait. A little Bagley's B1 would be very similar. But what those do is because it's balsa, it has more floatability, so it floats up faster than, say, a more neutrally buoyant plastic will. And there's some variation there too. Some plastics are more buoyant than others. But so that's a little bit about square bills. I love a square bill anytime the water is above 55 degrees. I fished it when it's colder than that too, but when I'm trying to fish that shallower cover and trying to kind of get around some stuff that I want to, bouncing it off of docks, bounce it off the bases of cypress trees, those kind of things, this is a great bait for pulling around brush piles or through brush piles or through laid down logs, that kind of thing. So here's another option, and this is probably the most common bill style, and that is a rounded. It's a round bill. They tend to have less wobble. Can have more, can have less, but what they do is they tend to dig a little deeper, and that bait's going to get deeper into the water column. And there are a bunch of different sizes. This is a DT6 and a Rapala. This one is a DT10, and I'm not sure if you can see the bill on that DT10 versus this DT6 in that package. I really probably needed to take that out of the package before we did this, but you can see there's a pronounced difference. And what makes a difference in how deep a crankbait goes is a couple of things. One is how neutrally buoyant is it? How big is this bill? How long is the bill? And how wide is the bill? Those are the two things, because that bill is what allows that bait to dive. It tends to run more like this when you're pulling it down, and then when it comes down to the bottom, it's just digging. But what happens is sometimes if you over dig it, it'll ride more like this, and that's when you really feel it, not really running quite as true. What I like to do is let it come down, hit the bottom, float up a little bit, come down, hit the bottom, float up a little bit, and then what that allows it to do is that's giving you those reflex strikes. So, but you want to play with that stop and go retrieve, because sometimes you do want that bait going through there and just digging along the bottom too. So, play with it. Let the bass tell you what they're looking for, and let them really kind of decide that. Now, there's another style of this bill. See how narrow that bill is? It doesn't have as much wobble. If you had one that was wider, like on a DR200, that DR200 and the DT6 both get to about the same depth, but the DR200 is going to have more side to side because it has a wider bill. I should have had a DR200 down here, which is a Bandit. But the wider the bill, the more wobble it'll have, the more and the longer the bill, the deeper it'll go. So here's another great option, and this is one of those spring baits that I really like to throw a lot. This is a coffin style bill. It's a really great summer bait too. It's kind of a best of both worlds. So with this coffin style bill, you have the length and everything of a square bill, but then you also have the front like a square bill, and you have the length of a rounded. So, but what that does for you is it gives you a little more weedless, deeper diving crankbait, and it's also because this bait is narrower. It doesn't have as much side to side. It tends to be a great cold water bait. Another really good example is a Rapala Shad Rap. A number 5, number 7 are two of the most popular ones out there during the summer, or during the winter, and during the spring, early spring. So, but because it does have that narrower and clearer water, it is hard to beat because it's going to give a more natural look, as it's not just really thumping really hard. So let's see, and what another really common question I get is what speed do you pull a crankbait at? When we talk about speed, it's a relative thing. Take it into consideration. During the winter, during the early spring, you want to slow it down a little bit. Bass are cold-blooded creatures. They're not going to move quite as fast, but don't ever rule it out. Sometimes they do. That bait coming just whizzing by their head just forces them to turn around and eat it. But play with a couple of different variations. When we talk about jerk baits later on, I'll talk about that a little bit too when it comes to speed. But try different things, but always be paying attention to how you're retrieving a bait, how you're working with it, so that you can see what's the best way to work that bait, what's the best way to make it work. So let the fish tell you. I mean, you're cranking it real fast, trying to get it in, and one eats it. Well, what did that just tell you? It tells you need to be just really burning that thing. That may be a situation where you go to a lipless crankbait like a rattle trap. We're going to talk about that in another segment, but that's another good option. So you're reeling it in, and you stop to look at something, and all of a sudden you get that bite. That could be that, hey, they're looking for it to be stopped. So you might reel that fish in, and then go out there and just reel, stop, 1, 2, 3, stop, pause, jerk, reel, jerk, and just do different little things to see what it takes to trigger that strike. But a lot of times that strike is really going to be triggered when a bait's coming down and it hits that limb, or it hits something and pops and deflects up, and that's a lot of times when you're going to get a bite. We had a trip on Grenada Lake fishing a roadbed one day, and literally our technique was we would throw up there with a DR200, we'd reel it to lodge onto a roadbed, we'd get it lodged, and we would sit there and just literally shake that thing trying to get it loose, and the way it happens, I'd hung one up. And I was sitting there shaking it, and a fish literally came up, ate it, took it off the roadbed for me, and we started intentionally hanging baits up on that roadbed just to do that. So something to always take into consideration. All right, so colors. we get a ton of questions that revolve around colors. Y'all hear me say this all the time. Colors are built to catch fishermen more than they are to catch fish. But I look at a couple particular things, and I really think around hues more than I think around colors. When fish are really really concentrating on shad, I like shad type colors. You know, white, gray, maybe a chartreuse belly, orange belly. Sometimes that kind of triggers maybe, I don't know. I'm not a fish. I don't know why they eat the things they eat sometimes. But something that looks like a shad is what I'm going to use in clear water. Something I'm going to use when I'm really fishing around shad-based food. Chartreuse and black, yellow and black, darker colors. These are going to be my muddy water colors. This is when the water's a little muddier. They can't see it as well. These are some great colors that they'll key on. So I'll throw those a lot of time in those kind of colors. This is an interesting color. This is a green gizzard. Let's see. No, the green gizzard is a more translucent bait. So this is a color, green gizzard, disco shad. Those are colors that I use when I am when I'm in really clear water, trying to, I think the fish just doesn't get quite as good a view. And of course you got crawfish colors. This is a great fall and spring color bait. Something with an orange and a red in it. This is a samurai, I think it's a Raven Red from Strike King. You've got Demon in the this is red crawdad. In the Rapala, you got Demon. But those reds and blacks, those are great little springtime colors. So always take that into consideration, spring and fall, when fish are kind of concentrating on crawfish. That's a great kind of color bait. But that's when you're catching them on those, you really want to be digging it into that dirt and digging around those gravel banks, those kind of things, because that's where they're going to be concentrating on. But you can catch fish on a crankbait anytime from the water 50 and above. Think faster during the summer. Think slower during the spring and fall. But always vary up your retrieves and see what you can come up with. So appreciate you guys tuning in today. I just wanted to kind of go through and show y'all a little bit about crankbaits. Black Bass Tackle, BRD Outdoors, S.Y. Wilson, all great supporters of the show. So just wanted to talk about that today. Thank you.